I want to talk about the claimed sacrifice of Jesus. It's something that Christians claim all the time, so I feel it's a very fair thing to actually investigate. They say that Jesus gave up everything for us. That's why we owe him love and obedience, because he is our Savior, because of what he sacrificed. But I want to look at that claim and say, was he capable of sacrifice in the way that we talk about sacrifice? Could he actually lose anything? And this isn't necessarily a new topic, of course, but I think we can look at it from a unique angle. I'm going to be doing a reaction video to Red Pen Logic. It's just a 4-minute video. We'll watch it in maybe 3 parts as he reacts to Matt Dillahunty talking about Jesus's bad weekend. So let me show you the first 45 seconds of Red Pen Logic's video where Matt Dillahunty kicks things off for us.
Could kill me right now and I would be permanently dead. And I would willingly do that if it would end world hunger and poverty. That is a sacrifice. Saying I'm going to let some people beat me and torture me and in a day and a half I'm going to rise up and become what I was before. I was God before, I'm God after. That's not a sacrifice. That's a bad weekend.
Well, and you're a 10 guy.
Okay.
It's really
What was the sacrifice? If you begin with $100 million and you end with $100 million, but you set the $100 million aside for 2.5 days, what did you sacrifice?
Maybe to ease the tension right away, I just want to say that as someone who was a Christian for 30 years, I fully understand how offensive this sounds. I understand how belittling it can seem to someone who really believes these things, who really thinks they have a personal relationship with the creator and savior of the universe, who died, who gave up everything specifically for them and their sin. So I can empathize on that gut level reaction that Christians have. By the way, I'm sure that Matt can as well. But Matt is saying something that is intentionally provocative. I've said the exact same thing. This is not me dogging on him, but I have started to question in the recent past how useful rhetorically this kind of thing is. Because when you throw out language that so quickly raises defenses, you have to ask at the end of the day, like, what is the goal here? My goal might be different from Matt's. My goal is to help people in that process, the in-between as I call it, who are deconstructing, doubting, or in the process of deconversion. A line like that might just push them away completely, but it doesn't invalidate the logic underneath it. And Matt has every right to make this kind of a counter-argument against this kind of a claim. I hear, he hears, we all hear constantly how Jesus gave up everything. That's the claim. Is it not fair to question what was actually lost? And from everything I've ever seen in every conversation I've ever had, everything I've ever witnessed about this, Christians constantly try to avoid this logic, usually by just getting offended. But that's not an answer. Red Pen Logic is going to try to give us an answer, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But before we do, I want to firm up what Matt is saying here. Sacrifice, in any meaningful sense, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, would require real cost, the possibility for real loss, the risk of actual failure. An analogy I heard a long time ago, I don't remember where I heard it, is say you have this son who is playing video games way too much. He's doing it when he's not supposed to. He's falling behind on his homework. He's treating his family bad when he's losing. And so the mother is just very distraught by this. The son recognizes that he has been doing this thing incorrectly. And so he says, you know what, Mom, I recognize this. I want to take accountability for this. I am going to sacrifice my PlayStation 5. I want to show you I value our family and what you've taught me more than just this video game. And so he chooses to give it away or sell it or destroy it or whatever. That's a real cost. It's also the risk of permanent loss. He may never get another PlayStation 5 again. But imagine a world where this boy knows with 100% certainty that if he does this, he will get all the credit for doing it, but that his mom will reward him not only with a brand new PlayStation 5, but all the games he's ever wanted and an Xbox to go. If he actually knew all of that, could it be a true sacrifice? Would it mean anything? If the mother found out that he was able to know all of that information, would she still receive that sacrifice in the same way? Would it be meaningful to her at all? Now, I think this can be improved upon, by the way. I'm just telling you one that I've heard that I think instantly connects a few dots. So again, the claim, Jesus gave up everything, but then you have Christian theology that says things like, Jesus knew he would resurrect. Jesus knows he will return to divine glory. Jesus knows the suffering is temporary. And we're going to get to that. Suffering's still counts, but I want you to see Red Pen Logic's response first, and I'm just about to play that. And also that Jesus knows the outcome is guaranteed. All of that Christian theology means that the sacrifice Jesus did is not analogous to what we mean when we talk about sacrifice, what it is for an actual human to sacrifice. Christians always want to have their cake and eat it too, with the hypostatic union of Jesus somehow being 100% man and 100% God. But if you're also 100% God, then when or if you even can sacrifice, it isn't the same thing as when man does it, even if you claim that he was also 100% man. And you're going to see that tension in the response we're about to watch. So why does this bad weekend line exist that so many of us have used or thought? Not to mock the suffering, but simply to expose the contradiction, to negate the false claim. So here's the first thing Red Pen Logic says.
This is frustrating. I get that this atheist doesn't believe Christianity. Fine. But this response demonstrates that he is not even trying to understand it. Here are two things to consider when responding to this challenge. First, this atheist just ignores the incarnation. Think about this. The king of the universe left his throne, enters into human history, lived a perfect life of obedience, and then willingly went to the cross on our behalf? Philippians 2 puts it this way: though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Let that sink in. The king became a servant. The creator becomes part of his creation. Jesus wasn't pretending to be human. He was truly human, experiencing life with all of its struggles and pains and limitations. My point is, Jesus' sacrifice didn't begin at the cross. It began with the incarnation, when he set aside his divine privileges and walked among us. Second, this atheist downplays Jesus' suffering and sacrifice. Notice how he treats Jesus' suffering like a minor weekend inconvenience, as if he had just a rough couple of days and then bounced right back. But since when do we measure suffering and sacrifice? Merely by its duration. Jesus was betrayed, abandoned, falsely accused, flogged, humiliated, and then killed on a cross, an excruciating execution. Yeah, but he came back to life. So what? Does that erase the suffering and sacrifice? The money analogy only underscores that this atheist has no idea what he's talking about. He says, if you begin with $100 million and you end with $100 million, but you set aside the $100 million for 2.5 days, what did you sacrifice? This completely misses the point.
Let's stop here for a second. Though just so you know, Red Pen Logic is about to make a counter analogy to Matt's $100 million one, which I'm very excited to cover. But first, we have a little chunk here. Notice what he did. He didn't really get into the tension of what Matt brought up. He kind of redefined sacrifice by introducing the incarnation to make this a longer period. It's now about Jesus's entire life, about his entire humanity, not just what I think is very fair to say most Christians are referring to when they talk about how Jesus gave up everything, his death, and maybe his suffering there at the end, which is clearly what Matt is reacting to. So moving the goalpost. Now, I don't think that it's uninteresting to think and talk about. In fact, we're going to get into it right now, because the way that he said it, it makes it sound awfully profound, but I think it collapses almost immediately when you inspect it just a little bit. Jesus emptied himself. He set aside his divine privileges. Privileges that, by the way, no other human has ever had. He created humans to have none of the good things that he just existed with from the beginning of time. I'm going to give my own counter analogy in just a second that will really show the inconsistency here. But first I want to ask, which privileges did he give up? These divine attributes. Omnipotence, being all-powerful. Well, that's temporarily restrained for these 33 years. Although, does Jesus have more power than anyone else on earth, even when he's in his human form? You betcha. So that one's a kind of. What about his omniscience? Well, we get this really weird tension actually with Jesus's omniscience. Sometimes he knows things, like he can literally read minds and hearts. He knows events that he wasn't there to witness. He knows what will happen in the future. But then sometimes he also doesn't. It's a very inconsistent power that comes and goes. So yes, to some regard, he gave up knowing everything perfectly and or limited himself just slightly for certain circumstances to work as plot devices. But that's the other thing that we're dealing with here. We're looking at this from a few angles. Within the Christian purview, who really believe the gospel accounts. So let's use those accounts and still see that Jesus had a ton of power that humans didn't have, a ton of knowledge that humans didn't have. But then also looking at the angle of historically, if there was a man, and I'm not a mythicist, I'll just go ahead and say probably a man that around this time in this area, something like Jesus that things got written down about. And then, of course, there's the idea that, none of this ever happened at all, and it's just lore and myth for religion and things like that. But I kind of want to stay within that Christian worldview. They're making a claim based off this, but even in their own ideas, it can't work. And that, I think, is what Matt was also trying to show. God's an immortal being. Did he give that up? No. What about his divine identity? No, that was never lost. The Christians won't let it happen. Again, see the hypostatic union. So he voluntarily changed some conditions on himself to become the thing he forced us all to be. All right, that would be kind of my next point here, is if you want to talk about the incarnation being such this huge sacrifice because it's so awful to be a human on earth, who made it that way? Who put the restrictions on humans that we have? Who created a world knowing what kind of suffering it would lead to? Who chose what pain receptors do in the body? Who chose the emotional, psychological states of depression, anxiety, fear, sorrow that will be so troublesome for Jesus to have to endure? Jesus did. God did. If you believe your Bible, your theology, they are one in the same. Jesus was there at creation. None of this got away from him. This isn't something that he's diving into to fix because someone else screwed it up. This is all under his sovereignty. So I don't see anything being forfeited. I see some things partially being paused. And then think about this. 33 years, which, by the way, many of his creation have had to endure suffering much worse for much longer. If Jesus came down for 500 years and suffered every single second, the worst possible thing that anyone could ever suffer as a human for that entire time, maybe we could start to have a conversation. And even if it was 500 years, but we only have the 33, even if for a being outside of time who has existed always, who has eons of eternities coming, 33 years is truly nothing. It is equivalent to 0 against infinity. So voluntarily coming down for 0% of time with 100% perfect knowledge that you will return for the remaining 99.999999, truly more like 100. Again, we cannot understand deep time, what infinity would really be like, and how nothing 33 years would be. It seems like everything to us, to Red Pen Logic, who's talking about this incarnation of 33 years of Jesus coming down and losing all these special privileges. Oh my gosh, what a sacrifice. No, not really. Not for what he was, not for what he will have, not for what he really didn't actually give up. And that's why I want to take the time to really talk through this here, because I understand why Matt said what he did. But a quick one-off provocative line like that can elicit this kind of 4-minute response that makes Christians feel so good and like Matt was so evil and stupid, which is essentially what Red Pen Logic is trying to insinuate, that Matt has no idea about Christianity. Are you kidding? But let me give you my own analogy that I think will make this stick better. How about a billionaire who disguises himself as a janitor for a short period of time? I don't care if you want to go with the 3 days or the 33 years. If you go with 33 years, then you also have to make this billionaire infinite. But if you want to just stick to a simpler example, talk about a normal human lifetime, and this billionaire who enjoys all of these amazing things and will continue to enjoy all of these amazing things voluntarily chooses to become a janitor for 3 days. Think undercover boss or something like that. Let's ask a few questions here. Can he lose his wealth? I mean, theoretically, yes, everyone could lose their wealth, but in the voluntary decision he's making for becoming a janitor for 3 days, will it all of a sudden drain him of all of his money? Of course not. Can he lose his power? Let's make him CEO of this place where he's now the janitor. When he's the janitor, is he still not the CEO? Did he actually have to give up his position, his title? Nope. Can he fail? Like, if he does terribly as a janitor for 3 days and his immediate boss fires him, does it actually mean anything? No, surprise, wow, your job's harder than I thought, but I'm still CEO, not really fired. Will he return to luxury on schedule? Yes, because it's within his control. He's the one controlling the whole thing. He's choosing how long this little experiment goes on for. Now, that's not to say that it would not be humbling. It's not to say that it would not be a challenge. It's not to say that it would not be dramatic. But what it is not is a sacrifice. Not in the way that we mean sacrifice, not one that would be worth the unending loyalty of people that have been in that same position as the CEO for much longer, under much worse conditions, with no guaranteed outcomes, with real loss and risk all along the way. It would not merit them bowing down and worshiping this guy, pledging lifelong loyalty to him because of this amazing thing he did. It's like the least he could do. And I think that's actually the fallacy all the way through with Red Pen Logic's response. It's an equivocation issue. He's conflating voluntary discomfort with existential sacrifice. Humans who sacrifice do not know the outcome. They can't. They can hope for one, they can assume one, they can bet on one. The odds could probably be that this thing might happen, but they cannot know. Jesus did. Humans who sacrifice cannot undo the cost. But when Jesus resurrected himself, he did. Humans who sacrifice may die permanently, but Jesus did not. Humans who sacrifice may actually lose everything forever. Jesus did not. And that's not just me being mean to Jesus here. By doctrinal standards, Jesus cannot do any of these things. Just a category distinction. But I think that covers most of what we showed. I'll show you one more clip here. It's not the entire rest of the video, but it's the main chunk. I'll react to that and we'll close out.
Imagine a little girl is kidnapped. To save her, her mother offers her own life in exchange. The kidnappers accept the trade. They take the mother, hold her captive, and subject her to horrific physical, emotional, and sexual abuse for an entire weekend. Then, for whatever reason, they decide to let her go. Now imagine someone saying, since she began with her freedom and ended with her freedom, but only set aside her freedom for 2.5 days, she never really made a sacrifice. See how ridiculous that sounds? This wasn't like misplacing your wallet for the weekend. It was the brutal murder of an innocent man who willingly took the punishment that we deserved. Yes, he came back to life, but that doesn't somehow negate his suffering and sacrifice. This atheist argument may sound catchy and play well to his base, but it completely fails to understand the weight of Jesus' sacrifice. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. This was the greatest act of love in human history.
His analogy's kind of proving everything I just said. Let's talk about that mother who is willing to actually sacrifice for her daughter. Does she know that she will survive? Nope. Did Jesus? Yes. Does she control this situation? No. Did Jesus? Yes. He might be giving up some control to let it happen, but he's controlling the whole thing. This mother would not have been, though. She would truly be out of control. That's half the terror and suffering right there. The mother faces permanent loss. Did Jesus? Nope. The mother is risking actual death, as in the ending of life. Did Jesus? No. Thank you for proving my point. What you call the sacrifice of Jesus is in no way the same thing that other humans actually go through when they sacrifice. That's Matt's point. And we're not saying it just to be jerks. We're saying it because you Christians won't stop saying how important the sacrifice of Jesus is. In fact, you're going a level even higher. You're saying he is sacrificing more than any human ever has. That's what makes him so much better than all of us. I would argue that in the analogy Red Pen Logic just gave, that mother is 1,000 times more a hero than the concept of Jesus ever could be. Let's give the whole story to the Christians here the way that they believe in it. Jesus had a much worse weekend than most people alive today will ever have. I have no problem saying that. Is it the worst death possible? Nope. Is it the worst death that's ever happened? Absolutely not. Not even close. Are there people that, if you can weigh suffering, have just suffered way more? There's not a doubt in my mind. Again, just the fact that Jesus was only 33 and not married and didn't have kids puts him in a category of lack of suffering that does not compare with anyone who has lost a spouse or lost a child. So no, it wasn't the worst thing that any human can ever go through, but it was a horrific ordeal. If you're an atheist or a Christian in this comment section, you have most likely never been tortured. You have definitely never been crucified. I'd place a large bet that none of you have had 40 lashes from a Roman guard, but that is precisely what Matt is conceding when he says he had a bad weekend. It was a bad weekend, but that's it, because then it was over, and then he was perfect. Then he was God. So I don't think Matt was trying to take away the suffering from Jesus. And by the way, I don't think most atheists do, although I've heard a few stupid things, of course. But it's a deflection of the main issue here, because Christians don't just say, hey, Jesus suffered. If that's all they said, I'd say, hey, you're probably right. But they claim more than that. And that is the claim that we're reacting to. So when you act like it's only about suffering, you're wrong. They say he gave everything. And when you get everything back, you didn't really give it, which is why Matt's $100 million analogy fits, because it wasn't about suffering, it was about loss. That's just too funny to me how myopic, and not even myopic, blind these Christians are about this issue. They have to be, because to acknowledge this is to lose the idea about Christianity, which is why we got the kind of response we got from Red Pen Logic. It's a dishonest response. It's not engaging with the actual issue because they can't, or they wouldn't be a Christian any longer. And it is this exact issue, by the way, that has moved so many people that are willing to be honest about this away from Christianity. Just tell me where I'm wrong in what I've covered today, because all I see is an apologist moving the goalpost, redefining terms, avoiding the actual issue, and making false comparisons to provide a bit of relief for his base that doesn't want to have to accept the reality of this situation. If that's what it means to be in the religion of perfect truth, thank goodness I'm no longer there. So that's it. Thank you so much for being here today. Let me know your thoughts on this one. I'll see you Thursday for a comment deep dive that I'm really excited to get to. And until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Ann, Boris, Chris, Grant, GVI, Jimmy, Joe, Kitboga, yep, the Kitboga, Matthew, Perry, and Shawn. My Humanist heroes: Chris, Craig, James, Jarrod, and Kristi. My Atheist advocates: Aquitar, Caleb, Dakota, Dan, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Jeremy, Jugs, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Sparky, and Thomas, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. Would you consider joining these fine people?